Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another session. Today, I have someone very special with me. She's Annie. I've known Annie for about, I think, 4 years now, and it only gets better. It's like wine, right? It gets better with age. And Annie is also like that. The more she ages, the more awesome she becomes. I think I should get some secret sauce from you on how you do that.
Well, I wasn't thinking you were going to talk about my age, but okay.
Yeah, never ask a woman her age. That's
Yeah,
there. But
it's wonderful to be here with you, Arya. Always special.
sure. So Annie here is going to talk about like an assorted mix of learning she's had like throughout her career. It's going to be more of a Q&A format or an interview format, if you may. But the content has been put together primarily by the both of us, and we converged on a couple of things that we absolutely need to talk about, right? And we came up with a bunch of questions that we think will be super useful. A lot of it is about personal branding, but a lot of it is also not about personal branding and all the generic things that you would want to know to do well in life in general, right?
Indeed.
Yes. Annie, do you want to like give a quick intro of yourself?
Well, I'm Annie Mathew, and for those you who don't know me, I'm very passionate about women, technology, healthcare, startups, students, basically about a whole bunch of things. And I love to work with young upcoming leaders like Arya,
Yeah.
who already shown what the power of coming together is. I'm very excited to be sharing, Arya, and I remember some time back that you had me share something on rethink.
Yes.
So loving it. Let's get started.
All right. So I am going to pull up our slides and let's start. Just a second. All right. So what we had initially was a question to start off with. And also because Godmothers, we're taking like a proper dig on princess stories, which is also why I think this context of glass slippers, becomes more relevant, right? And while Annie and I were chatting on what we should be talking about and stuff, this question sort of came up, right? Like, how will women break the glass ceilings if they're still trying to fit into glass slippers? Annie, what's your take on it? What do you think?
I think the world has changed so much and we've come a long way, but in parts, we are looking at the glass ceiling and wanting to break it, but at the same time, we can't let go of the glass slippers.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
only we could switch our glass slippers for a pair of sneakers and run with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It would be more comfortable as well. So,
Yes, indeed. So let's, over the next 30 minutes, let's explore what it means. What is this glass ceiling? How do we overcome it? And why we need everybody to kind of lean into this whole thing about flicking your glass slippers, tying up your laces, and running with it.
yes, absolutely. So this term glass ceiling has been very confusing for me as well, which is why I did put up a definition of the glass ceiling, more for my own sake, right? So that I really understand what this term does mean. And Google says that it's an unacknowledged barrier to advancement in any profession, especially for women and other minorities. And I think, yeah, while the definition does say it's unacknowledged, I think a lot of us are, talking about the glass ceiling and how we can break them and come forward and all of that. And it's just heartwarming to see the kind of conversations happening around it and how a lot of women today are, trying to do things to advance in their own professions, irrespective of the biases or the barriers trying to stop them. Right.
Right. And it's definitely there. Uh, because in the conversations, there's more open conversation, like you're saying, and we're talking about wage disparity. In our daily lives, we come across meetings where there are very few women around the table, and you'll see the woman probably not being a minority in that meeting itself, probably not heard as well. So, and I've come across people where men don't look at your in your eyes when they're talking to you about a subject, and you're there, you're the subject matter expert sitting at the table, but they don't look at you. So there are so many unconscious and conscious biases out there, as well as some hard facts like the difference in wages, the difference in the career growth, and some of this is natural because unless you always promote and bring up people whom you are confident of or trusting, and unless there's equal opportunity to access to these people, you will not get there, right? You may be as trustworthy and confident, but they don't feel the trust. Hence, a lot of work to do for us.
Yes, I so understand this. And given this conversation, right, I recall a particular incident from my workplace. So I'm in sales, and I'm the only woman in sales, and in particularly, inside sales, right? And what happened was, I'm like, since I'm new, I'm also trying to understand the biases in this industry because I come from a different background, and sales is perceived as an alpha man's profession, alpha
Yeah.
man game, right? So I was slightly concerned as to how people would take to a woman selling to them, be it the customers or even within the team, right? And I was, from day one, my effort has been to seek female mentors in sales, or at least women in sales, so that I don't feel left out, right? I don't feel like I'm the only person doing this, so that I can talk to them about the subtle issues that I feel, which I cannot probably bring up with my all men team, right? And as I was trying to do this, a colleague of mine was like, why are you even bothered about all these things? Why, there is no bias, there is nothing like that. And you shouldn't be worried about all these things, and instead just look at closing your numbers, right? Hitting your quota. I do get that, right? Yes, I will do whatever it takes to hit my quota. But at the same time, the fact that I am up against something more than what my peers are, I also have to fight the biases and put my A game forward, while maybe they don't have those biases to fight, right?
Right.
So I was just trying to run that extra mile and catch up with them, cover up whatever I can in whichever way possible, so that we're at par when it comes to, collaborating or competing, however it is, right?
Right.
So I think it's also something so subtle that we don't realize it exists, and sometimes women don't, and sometimes men don't either. But it's great that we are talking about these things and bringing it to light.
Yes.
And we found this image, which I think captures it so beautifully. So
Yes.
instead
So
of, yeah, go ahead.
let's break that glass ceiling, even if it means taking out your glass slipper and breaking it on that ceiling. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And I love the Cinderella and how there's a godmother behind it. Boobly boobly doo. So it is cute. It's nice.
Right.
Right. Now let's take up some hard questions. And Annie put up these hard questions, and to be very honest, I find it very hard to answer. So I think it's going to be equally hard for you as well, but these should be answered in some sense to get clarity on who you are, what you want to do, where you want to get to, and so on. Annie, over to you.
Thanks, Arya. And it's like in the art of war, they say, know thyself first. And as you get on with years of experience, you realize that, oh, this is so important. If only somebody had told me to spend 1 month figuring this out in the beginning and periodically, because it keeps changing, I would have, it would have been very helpful. So some of those hard questions that we need to sit down and think about and take inputs from others to actually help fructify it is what makes me happy and satisfied. This is so crucial because generally people are happy when you are in the flow. That is when you're really doing something that you love, or you're really into doing whatever you're doing.
Right.
And that's when not only are you happy and satisfied, that same happiness and satisfaction means that you're doing exceedingly well at
Right.
whatever it is, which is foundational. So that is one of the things. Then it is, what are my strengths and weaknesses? So I'm happy doing a lot of things, but then some of my strengths actually lend itself very well to pick up one path.
Right.
We can identify that and find that early in life, um, then you can chart that path so well. Equally important is to know your weaknesses. Now, there's always a strength-based leadership thing that says focus on your strengths and not on your weaknesses. But it's important to know what your weaknesses are and take the help required to at least neutralize it, right? You don't need to bother about converting a weakness into a strength. But in some cases, it is good and maybe essential to neutralize some of your weaknesses.
To not let it damage you, at least.
Yes, yes. What is my career goal? So when we talk about careers, I remember all my life, I have been going with the flow. I have not charted out a career path and then decided what I would do then and the next and all that. I have two daughters. And each time I was very clear that I'm not going to work. I need all the leave I can, beg, borrow, steal. But at least a year I'm going to spend with my baby at home, because that's going to impact that baby for her whole life. However, I then learned from my daughters who are now charting their own career. And I'm amazed by how clear they are about what they want and what they don't want. So for me, it was about leveraging an opportunity that came my way. And I think it was because in those days, opportunities were not that great. And if you're an engineer, this is what you do. If you're a doctor, you do that. But today, for the women of today, there are so many things you could do and chart. And my elder daughter, Elizabeth, for example, is very clear that I don't want to do PR. I want to focus on content. And she was working in a startup. And when they forced her to do PR, she was very clear, I don't want to do it. I won't do it. Whereas I would be like, okay, you need me to do PR. Okay, let me try. So I think I really admire the millennials and the current generation who are clear and will stand their path. However, I must say that there is a lot of advantage to being flexible, to being that person, that go-to person within an organization who you can entrust with whatever is needed.
Mm-hmm.
But the point here is, it is important to have some idea of your career goals. And more importantly, be clear about what is your next step, because we'll see why that is important in a short time. But it's absolutely important for you to sit down and think about what should be the next role or a few roles that I do want to take up. Let's go to the next one. What am I beyond work? And I think this for me is says it all. Because I see my life as something of work plus work, yes, but my priority lies still with family and children and parents and friends and a whole lot outside of work. And when you are able to distance yourself and have a perspective that work is one component and you need to be successful there, but there are other parts of life that need to be successful too, for which you might need to do some give and take. Also, because today companies come and go. I mean, some Uber comes and 10 or maybe hundreds of traditional businesses have lost their business, right? Which means retrenchment, people lose work.
Yep.
If you are solely dependent on work for your well-being and happiness, when you lose that work, it can be devastating. I've seen this happen 2 or 3 times in my career as companies have retrenched at large scale and got mergers and acquisitions and stuff like that. So this is going to happen to you at some point if you are working, or if you are a founder, at some point you may shut down as well. So there's a lot to life beyond work is a very important piece to know and focus on.
Right. So I do have some follow-up questions on what we just discussed, right? So when you said that Elizabeth has, some excellent clarity on what she does want and what she doesn't want, how does she do it? Like, how does she even attain that clarity? Which I think is the big question in front of a lot of people. Like every single person I talk to, they're like, I want to find the purpose of my life. I want to know what I'm good at. I want to know what I like doing, but I don't know how to. This is what I want, but I need help getting there. Yeah.
So with Elizabeth, I think she's generally a person who is who sits and thinks a lot through things. I think that helps. Generally, we are so busy doing stuff, we don't spend enough time ruminating about it. So she goes off for these yoga weeks, and I remember she went to what is it, Dharmashala? Spend 10 days there where you don't speak, you only think. So she does stuff like that, which I wish I could do. And she comes back a little bit more clearer about what she wants in life than when she went. So I totally think taking time off to think about yourself, what you want to do, what you don't want to do is useful.
Yeah.
But it also depends on personalities, right? Me as a personality, I want to do everything and I want to have the cake and eat it too. And, I'm that kind of a personality. I can do a wide variety of things. So then I think I'll have even more difficulty in kind of saying what I will not do. But it's so important to get to that point of saying, this is what I will do and spend most of your time in. This is what I don't want. I must share this great insight from Charlie Munger.
Yes.
So he was talking about working with a founder and saying that, hey, what are your top 20 priorities? So he listed top 20 priorities, took some time. And then he said, okay, what are your top 5? Then he said, these are my top 5. And then Charlie asked, so what are you going to do with this list? And then the other guy said, I'm going to work on my top 5 and mostly, and I'm going to spend little time on the other 15 so I can cover my top 20. And I don't know whether it's Charlie or Warren Buffett. They are almost got so many common thinking. So one of them, either Charlie or Warren Buffett, said, and that's where you're wrong. You focus 100% on your top 5 and you do 0 on the next 15. And it struck me because that is all about prioritization, focus, and that's where I think a lot of success lies, in being able to do that prioritization. How do you get to it? I think many ways, but thinking through it is helpful for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've found useful is that I journal. It's not a routine, but I write on and off. So typically, when you feel down or when you want to share something exciting, most people pick up a phone and talk to someone. I write it down. So, and what I've realized is I recently took a professional break and I went through all my journals. I had about like 7-8 books right from college days. And so I had a, bird's eye view of what my goals were back then. And over the period of 2 years, which of them manifested, which of them did not. And it was quite clear that the ones that I was thinking about more, even not actively, right? The ones that were in the back of my mind kept manifesting over time, right? Like even Godmothers has been around in this thing, back of my mind for a long time. And at some point, I'm actually taking action on it. So the way I felt was that, if it's in my mind, at least consciously or subconsciously, it will manifest at some point in time because I will take action on it some point later, if not today. And that sort of picture was clear. So I had this bucket list written down in my final year of college, and everything was ticked at the end of 2 years, although it was not an intended effort, right?
Right.
So,
So write it down,
right,
journal.
yes.
Right. Yeah.
I,
Definitely.
and also like revisit those journals, sometimes.
Excellent. So basically, don't let your job title define you. Have a life beyond work. So this is the same point. The career is not the same as your job. And to this point, in a short while, we'll talk about the two superpowers. So I'll talk about it then.
What is your definition of personal brand? I mean, I think it means, to each their own. Like I met this founder last day and she says, my company is my brand, right? So she is all things her company, maybe nothing other than that. But for me, it's a myriad of things. Like I stand for education, inclusion. So all of that is a part of my brand. I also associate myself as a writer. So that's also part of my brand. So I associate myself in a slightly different way. She does differently. But what is your take? What's your definition?
Let me go to the second part of why.
Right.
So everyone has a personal brand, even if you are not aware of it, even if you're not actively doing anything. So so it's important, right? Because you already have a brand which is you in the world outside. That's who you are perceived to be. So it's super important. What is a personal brand? My definition of personal brand is how you are perceived, literally, because you it could be that it's just the work, or it could be something else, but regardless of that, it is what people perceive you to be. And even if you take an organization and look at their brand, it is the same thing. How is that organization perceived to be? So it's the same thing. But this is super important now because even hiring is done through a lot of AI in it. And AI is out there looking for you. If you Google your own name, what is it that you're coming up with? Take a look at that and you will know what your personal brand is from a digital perspective. Now, if somebody is, if you're applying for a job and somebody is got AI out there, they're looking at this social media digital footprint that you have and deciding that you are A, B, and C, then you better own that personal brand of yours and make sure that they're seeing what you want them to see. And so it is super, super important that we take ownership of this. And I think that is personal brand, when you take ownership of who you are perceived to be. So it's active ownership of that. So let's look at this. Says it so well. I am my brand, and you need to build it without an apology. So how do we do this? So a few key things, and it takes an hour to go into each of this, but basically when you build your personal brand, be your authentic self. Now, we don't live in an island. We live in a world with a lot of other people in communities. So being authentic doesn't mean just doing what you feel like all the time. Just like you would be in a society, there are rules and there are perceptions, and there are other people who are also being their authentic self, which you may not like, and so on. So it's important to know the context of the culture, the place, the people around you, and all that stuff. And think about being authentic within that context. And that's super important, especially since I moved from India to Malaysia and now look at the Asia Pacific market. This has become so important, because what my personal brand was in India has to be modified for Thailand versus Vietnam versus Korea. But I still need to be authentic. So it's not easy, but I think keeping the core authenticity, but able to know the context, and that little spice of being bold, right? So I know the context. This is my authentic self, and I'm true to my authenticity. There are some things I want to do. I will be a little bold. For example, last week we had President Jokowi of Indonesia and Satya Nadella at the developer conference in Jakarta.
Nice.
So the marketing lead there, the CMO lead, actually, somebody called Densi, she was so inspired by having Jokowi and Indonesia, DEFCON, all of that. And she was in the front line. So she went up to President Jokowi and said, they say, Pa Jokowi, can I have a selfie with you? And remember, Satya Nadella is standing there, her boss and her boss's boss, and everybody is there. And she was bold enough to go do it. And the president was so sweet enough to take her phone and do a selfie with her. It was a bold move. It was very authentic from her point of view. So that's a funny incident, but in a work environment, I think being bold is super important. Even when you want to crack those biases, when you see somebody else being biased against, being bold enough to provide that support and all of that in whatever context it is super important. So, and it's not easy to be bold. We can say all we want that we'll be bold, but there are situations where being bold might somewhere taking a hit somewhere.
Yes.
So this is something.
I do have a point to add here, but with respect to being your authentic self. So, for the longest time, I used to think of myself as in a certain way. And there used to be this voice inside that would sort of hold me back, and not let me accept it with both hands and say, this is who I am, or this is what I like. And then at some point, I realized that society has so many expectations from you. Your family does, you do. And all of this sort of is shaping up what I do in my life, right? And it's not me being genuinely, honestly true to what I really want to do. And also because, you may have come a long way in this false persona that you've adopted, that it becomes hard to even leave it behind.
Yes.
And that is where you really become bold and say that I am going to ditch that and really do, what I truly, truly believe in doing, or to do justice to who I am. I think that.
And if I may talk about that instance when I saw your authenticity, context, and boldness, was the time you wanted to go on the yatra.
Yes.
I remember that so clearly because we had those conversations. You were like, my parents don't want to let me go. Which Indian family lets a girl go alone on a train all over India?
Yeah.
But I got to do it. And then so you were bold about it, that you stuck to your guns. But I really appreciate the context that you understood, that your mom was scared, your dad was scared, that you had to somehow give them confidence and still make it happen.
Yes.
So there's a TED talk or something, I think, where you're talking about it. You guys should go watch it.
Sure. I think that has helped a lot of students to talk to their parents as well.
Yes. So super cool. Well, I think we don't need to talk too much about this. Perception is reality unless proven otherwise, which is why you need to actively own your personal brand and make sure that what is seen out there is what you actually want to be seen. Because the same story could be said in many different ways, which is why you need to take control of your narrative. Sometimes a narrative is about you have done great stuff, but you're shy and you think it is not good to be talking about it yourself. So you don't say it. At other times, it could be a negative incident and you were in the right, but a whole lot of people think you did wrong. And that's definitely time to take control of your narrative. And unless you are open and talk about it, you cannot change that narrative. If you're silent and you're too scared to say anything, then whoever is talking about it will take charge of the narrative. And I have actually mentored a few who were in these situations and had to kind of be bold and take control of that narrative. These are hard situations, but the point here is you need to take control of your narrative. You need to find people who can guide you that through that process, especially in tough scenarios within organizations where there is harassment or other scenarios, and these all happen all the time. How do you go about it? And here I think taking control of your narrative is super important. Okay, do you want to add anything, Arya?
No, I think you said it all. I mean, I really agree with that. Like, if you don't say it, people will just assume whatever they want to and live with it. So, and once a perception is formed, it's quite hard to change it as well. So, might as well actively own it and set that context and narrative as to who you are. Hey, this is what I do. This is what I stand for. And even in your workplace, even the little things, like when someone shows up late to a meeting with you, it's so important to set that context that, hey, this is not appreciated, right? I turn up on time, I expect you to do so as well. So even the little things where there are certain values you stand by, I think it makes a lot of sense to put it out there active.
Right. And sometimes in that same context of probably missing a meeting because you had your child's graduation day or your child's school day where parent needs to be there and you opted to go there and miss a meeting. When you come back, you might hear noises about, oh, she wasn't here, she went to the school or something like that. Take charge then and explain, hey, we all have families and kids, and that's priority. Kind of voice it, and then other people will join you. That's a funny thing. The moment you start voicing these things, there are people who band together with you to kind of help you through these things. So what's your story out there? So you need to think about your story, your narrative. Is that the perception out there? Is there something you need to do to make sure that your story, your narrative is actually yours, the way you want it said? Super important. Okay. 2 secret powers. Well, this is, I think both Arya and I have stories around this. Why don't you go ahead, Arya? Talk about your superpowers.
Well, I think I do both of these. I actively ask for help, and I also offer help, right? And sometimes I offer help to get help, if it makes sense, right? So in the first context, I think the same example that you did take, let's say Jagrati Yatra, but I'll take a different example. So I got invited to go to Google I/O while I was in third year of college, but my semester exams were happening on the same dates. If I went for the conference, I'll miss 3 exams. And if I miss 3 exams, my graduation will be delayed, which is not a favorable outcome, right? So one of the things both my parents and my teachers encouraged me to do was talk to the vice chancellor of the university to see if he can do special exams for us. There is no history of this being done. But I wrote a letter, he didn't see it. I took a copy, I went to his office, waited for hours. I finally got a meeting with him. And I said, hey, this is the context. I have to go. I'm one of the 2 people going from India, and I really want to represent our university as well. And he said, yeah, go ahead. He just put a signature and everything followed. So they set up a special exam. I went for the conference. I saw Sundar Pichai launching Google Home and all that. I come back, I write my exams, I get results on time, and I graduate on time. So
Awesome.
yeah, that is one, like, since then, even like since then I've believed that, there are like only very few rules that you can't bend or you can't like modify. And in most cases, with the right context and genuine story, you might be given a second chance. You just have to ask, right?
That is true. So true. I have a story to share on ask and you shall receive.
Yeah.
So I was in the HIMSS board. HIMSS is a global, US-based global nonprofit organization which drives technology into healthcare. Healthcare is one of my passions, so naturally I was working in healthcare and technology, and so I got onto the board. So we had a board reshuffle in 2016, early 2016. And so they're going around the table and saying, so nominate yourself for secretary, joint secretary, treasurer, joint treasurer, president, etc., vice president, etc. So I am sitting in that call really, and thinking to myself, I have so much work to do at Microsoft. I should probably take a joint secretary or a vice president or something joint, right? So you don't have to, you can balance it all. And as I was sitting there, I was thinking that how many women have had the opportunity to get, put your hands up at least. You don't know whether you get it or not. Put your hands up for a president position and then think to themselves, I should be a joint secretary because I don't have time. And I said, what example am I setting for my daughters? What example am I setting for all the women I know?
Yeah.
And in a split second, I just spoke up and I said, I'm putting my nomination for the president. And then it took a few days for the result to come out. And those few days, I was talking to everybody I knew. Will I be able to do it? Did I do the wrong thing? Is this doing too much, etc., etc.? And everybody was supportive. And I did get to be the president of HIMSS India till I left India. So that was a year's thing. But the point was, I spoke up, I asked, and I got it.
So you ask and then figure out how to do it, but you ask first. Yeah.
Ask first, and then. So when it's a leap, it's always scary.
Yeah.
The thing is that courage is not absence of fear, right? Courage is just handling that fear. So that was so clear. So that is clearly, so we know we have to ask, and you have to find the courage to ask. And for example, in at work, suppose you think you should get a raise, you should get a promotion, and you wait for all your work to be noticed and be given. Sometimes it never comes. So the point is, when you have that conversation with your manager, you set out why you think you are eligible for a raise, a promotion, or whatever it is. And it's, even if you don't get it that time, be sure that this ask has registered because they never saw you in that light till you explained why, and it'll come through at some point of time.
Yes, absolutely.
So definitely ask, and you shall receive. When, we don't know, but you shall receive.
At least it will be in the back of their mind that, this person has requested for something like this.
Yes.
Or it at least sets context that you are someone, who aspires to be in, let's say, a leadership role as a president, right?
Yes.
So maybe if not this term, at some other point, you would be offered that.
Right. On the give to get piece, here's, and I'll say this very short because we got a lot more to cover. But the point is about the first half of my career, I was leveraging learning and certification to increase my knowledge. And then that gave me a lot of ups in my career. But the last half of my career, I know really, the more I started giving to communities, like HIMSS, like the Startup Village, like Rethink and everything else, the more I started giving to communities, the more it came back to me in my career as well, at work as well. Because now when you reach out to someone, you've got 2-3 other industry positions or roles or voluntary efforts or whatever it is to say to who you are, than just say you are the director of developer relations at Microsoft, right? So it enormously changes your playing field. So make sure you get out there, be part of industry, industry forums, communities, and give by taking on roles, which means that you'll have to work on weekends and go that extra mile, but do that to build out a holistic life and career.
Totally. And even with Godmothers, I think we are giving, not just in monetary terms, but this is giving. You're taking out an hour or two of your precious schedule and you're giving it to someone. And you will definitely get back in terms of a lot of ways. Maybe you locate new talent. The one example here is that I was referred for a Google role because of my community relations work. So even new job opportunities come by your way. You find new teammates.
Absolutely. And the get can even be a morning like this, right? And
Yes.
chatting about stuff we've done together. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's totally non-monetary as well. We just spoke about our stories.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Up to you. I'll let you speak first.
Lone wolf versus pack. Definitely pack. So like they say, if you want to travel fast, go it alone. But if you want to travel farthest, then go in a group.
Yeah.
I totally believe that. So to that point, success at work. So let's focus on work for a bit. And it's important to have mentors and sponsors and sometimes coaches who can help you make that small difference in whatever you're trying to do. But ultimately, creating allies and what we call allyship within the organization is super, super powerful. And it's powerful because, for example, getting a sponsor is not easy. And if you get a sponsor and you don't have a good chemistry with the sponsor or the mentor, then it's useless.
Yes.
Right? So what allyship does is that you find the right sponsors and mentors, because now you have got a wider variety of people who know what you're doing, are working with you, who love working with you, and their voices actually influence sponsors and mentors to find you as well. So it's not just about you hunting for sponsors and mentors, but actually them finding you. So this allyship is super important when we are trying to break the glass ceiling, when we're trying to fight against a bias, when we're just trying to get some awesome work done. So people need to go that extra mile. They do that for their allies.
Yeah.
Arya, go ahead with an example.
Yeah, bunch of examples here. So one thing is, when it comes to making allies, I've like diligently stopped looking just upwards, right? And I spend a lot of time, with my peers or my juniors, like people coming up, like those who are just graduating. Because the way I see it, these are smart people, and in about 10 or 15 years, they are going to rise to leadership. They're going to do kick-ass stuff. And we are going to make a great team in some sense, right? And it just doesn't make sense only looking at people who can help you directly right now, but also investing in that pipeline to come eventually. Right?
And allies is not about seniority at all. It's about the mass of people you would be with. So you're totally spot on there.
Yeah.
Let's look at this. So these are my allyship stuff. So the women here on the right. So what they say about girls should have girl gangs.
Yeah.
My gang in Bangalore. This is Irina Ghosh. She and I share the same birthday, by the way.
Nice.
And then there is Dhania, and that is Swapna. So we catch up every now and then and make sure that we are there for each other. So when we are in trouble or when we are celebrating, they are great. But we are great allies at work. We all all of us used to work in Microsoft, and Sapna's not there now, but it's a great, strong network that we have now. See that it is small, but it is strong, and we kind of help each other through. the things that
I
we go.
actually, I actually read this line somewhere. Will your team go into battle for you? Right.
Yeah. Yes.
So these are the people you would count on if you had to take down something and they had to get something done, and these people would be there with you to make that happen. So
Right. On the left here is the recently concluded Jakarta DevCon, and this was the awesome tech team which was doing the tech showcase. So
nice.
it was just a moment, but it kind of bonded us together. So super important. This is something so important, leveraging network authentically without guilt. Now, guilt is something that is so deeply embedded. Or rather, it comes from very deeply embedded thoughts that we can do it this way, we cannot do it this way and that way, and things like that. So, so the point is, it's okay to leverage your network, and women are particularly known for being shy of leveraging network. Okay, I know that person very well, but what would he think if I go and ask him, can he sponsor this project, or
Yeah.
uh, can he put two of his team members on this project? But the point is that step back and know the perspective a little bit. If what you're doing is good for the organization, go ahead and do it. I mean, there's no guilt about any of the things that you do. You need to leverage network authentically to give back more to your organization. So what do you think about it?
Same, Annie. Like, I absolutely agree there. And there is, I don't know where this even comes from. You know, it's so inherent to us that, oh, what will they think? Should I even do it? Maybe I'm bothering them. So sometimes some people ping me and they're like, oh, I know you're very busy. I'm so sorry. They start with 100 sorries and then they ask what they want to ask, which doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah. Oh, this is actually when we first met. That's the first handshake we ever had, like 3, 4 years back. Uh, and I think even give to get, right? I think it applies to the two of us here in this context. Because
Mm.
Annie first came for International Women's Day. Oh yeah, it's actually 3 years back, almost exactly at this time. Yeah.
Exactly.
So Annie was the speaker for our conference there. We had only like 10, 15 people attending it. And I felt so bad about it. Like, I'm getting her for a conference and I don't have enough audience to showcase. But she was like, relax. I know how it is with women and these conferences. So I understand. You made me feel comfortable in that moment. And I think more than anything, I found a friend in you. Like, you were so approachable and so warm, that it just diffused all the nervousness I had at that back, in those days when I was still a student, right?
And I remember thinking the energy and passion you had, this girl's gonna go places. So just the energy and passion made me want to contribute more. And the more I got to know you, I know the secret behind that.
Yeah.
So, how are we on time, Arya?
Let's quickly cover in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. How can you own your own narrative and accomplishment? So, this is the how part of what we're talking about. Um, so, the first is to remove guilt in owning your narrative and your brand, and knowing why you do it kind of takes away the guilt. For example, it's you, and even when you go out in person, you will show up in a certain way, and that's the way people see you. And when you're online, and if you don't know how you're showing up, that's a problem. So it's very clear that, just as in person, even online, you need to own your own presence, and hence the narrative is important as well. Exposure builds confidence. Now, when you're not feeling confident, go to community meetups, go to conferences, put yourself up to speak, put up your hand even when you are feeling nervous, and then figure out the nerves later. But those things matter, and it's important to say it right, because there's a thin line between kind of bragging and sharing. So
Yes.
it's important to do all those things. And in that context, why do we actually talk about our accomplishments? That is to establish credibility, and that's so important. Why should 1,000 people listen to you? So you have to take that 1 minute at the start of every event, every conversation with a new person or a new audience to establish credibility. And it is perfectly fine to say what are the highlights of who you are, and that's just it, because they need context.
Yes, absolutely on point. Yeah. So
Love this.
yeah, one of the students actually wrote to me a few months back, and she was like, I've done so many things, but I don't feel like putting it in my resume just because I feel I'm boasting. So she is not boasting, she feels she's boasting, right? So this is something that I also reflected upon at that point in time. And the context here is that when I graduated and got my degree certificate, I actually put it up everywhere and celebrated it. So I was like, I did a ton of things, but I graduated with good scores. And I'm not bragging about it because I actually did it. Those are the facts, right? So
Yeah.
even on our resumes or LinkedIn profiles, when we write that I organized a meetup with 1,000 women, or a conference for 250 women, or I built this project with XYZ tools. I managed a team of 5. We're giving actual numbers and facts and not just making it up out of thin air.
So true. The other side of it is that it's your duty to share impact. When you look at it from a company, organization, or career perspective, it's not about boasting. It's about what you achieved with those resources within that time. So this is an example of the global AI bootcamp we did, and these were small boot camps that happened across all this. And each one of those people were posting it and sharing it about what they did. But I was managing the whole APAC and all of this. So I had the opportunity and I had a duty to share. So what exactly happened on 14th December? Look at the number of countries we covered and the number of topics and speakers that we covered. So that was the moment that I had to do it. Definitely a great story to tell, but I could have not told it as well, thinking that, oh, they are all individually saying, now, why should I say that again? But the point is impact. And to bring that impact, you have to aggregate stuff that's done within your watch and share that.
How do you strengthen your brand? Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, I think communication is super important. We spoke about communication all this while, but just to say that know your elevator pitches. You might get that 3 minutes. You may get 30 minutes as well, but still you should start with your elevator pitch, because people have attention span, which is very short. So, and this is so difficult to call everything of what you do and then be able to say, give an under 1 minute pitch of who you are or what you do or your company, or take anything for that matter. The second thing is, a lot of the times we think we are saying the right things, but watch for the tone and voice you use in communication. I find it so important, earlier and more so now, because there are so many different cultures and hence intonations can be all different. But even in a regular day to day, I think the tone and voice changes what we say significantly. Your digital footprint, we spoke about it, providing context. So when you communicate, people would be at different levels. Some may get it, some may not. So answering why you're doing this, providing that context is always very important, as important as establishing your credibility. So take that 30 seconds to establish your credibility, take that 1 minute to provide the context, and then go into the rest of it. And do it all without guilt, because now you know why you're doing it. So there's no guilt to it.
Just to add that, when it comes to elevator pitches, right, I've seen people say, "Hi, I'm Arya and I work at ABC company." that is their typical pitch, right? But what do you do? Like, what are some things you've already accomplished that you're proud of? What is something that you're working on right now, right? So I think when it comes to elevator pitches, you should like lead with what you do, as against I work with someone, I work in this company, or I work somewhere else.
Right. So right. And practice that.
Yeah.
If you don't practice, it's hard to do anything under a minute.
Yeah.
So practice it, and always the first line or two practiced is fine, and then you can go being your own self. So yes.
I mean, this is we did briefly touch upon this,
Yeah.
on how to attain clarity. And for me, it's writing. For Elizabeth, it's thinking. But let's delve a bit deeper on this.
Okay. So developing mental models is about actually, so there are about 70 odd mental models already there. For example, the Pareto principle is a mental model.
Right.
So you take a humongous data set and you don't know how to deal with 100 things or 100 suppliers, that 80-20 rule works. Focus on the, or 100 customers, and focus on the 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the customers. So that tells you immediately, oh, focus on the 20% customers who give you that 80% revenue, right? So that kind of applies everywhere. That's a mental model. So there are over 100 mental models really available out there. Go learn some of them, but it's important to take time to ruminate from your experiences and create those mental models for you as it applies to your business or your life or something like that.
Yeah. Put it in context for
Yeah,
your personal life and situation.
right. So the next time you are in similar situations, you can quickly make sense of it. Energy. Yeah, I think this is something that, like they say now, don't manage time, manage energy. So it is about the energy and the passion that you bring to the table. And so if you don't leave time for yourself, for you to, recharge, tap into it, and then be able to share it, then at the end of the day, you will be doing a lot of things, but you may not be influencing many people or energizing others and, rallying them behind your vision.
You may
So
not
it's
be present in what you're doing, though. I get
yes.
this. Like, I don't sleep enough. And this is something I hear from all the people I worked with, that you should sleep more. And I'm sometimes not present in meetings. I'm either drowsy or not
Mm.
thinking actively. So my top priority for this month is to sleep properly.
Good. Good that you found out what you need to do. So that's what you need to do. So each one has to find their own things.
Yes, a
Word
word
of,
of caution.
that's yours.
Well, I think for me, one thing I've learned the hard way is to not trust everyone. I've, in the sense that there may be a lot of people out there who might not be doing things for your best interest. People might just be functioning for their own self interest. And the more you develop that ability to watch out for yourself and be safe out there, I think that's one thing you cannot live without. You have to be safe. So improve your intuitive understanding of how people are, what they're expecting out of you from any conversation or a particular relationship, either in business or even outside, right? So, and then try and be safe.
Another perspective to this is that women generally tend to get emotionally involved in the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
So I have stayed for 8 years or so in 3 companies that I worked with, because that's the loyalty trap. I'm just so involved and engaged, and I would just want to see that company do well.
Yeah.
And not always the right thing, because the company will continue even if you're not there, and you should be. And sometimes it's about asking, right? Asking your manager or your sponsor or mentor that help me chart my next path, which comes back to the first thing. What's the next step you want? If you know that, you won't fall into a loyalty trap, because now you know what's the next step you need to do, so you will plan for that. That's the other aspect of loyalty trap.
So this is something that Sujo shared with me. Like I'm very rookie when it comes to taking criticism and feedback. And I let myself even cry sometimes or feel really bad about it, right? If I did something and it didn't come out really well, I do feel bad and I let myself feel bad for a while. But since this message has come my way, I try to bring it back home, wherever wherever I am. Maybe I have done exceedingly well and I'm feeling brilliant. I'm like, you are so cool, Arya, you are awesome. But even then I try to bring that a bit down and understand that, hey, you still have to start afresh tomorrow. What's done is done. Same for the other way around, right? I might be feeling pathetic, like a loser, but still I feel that tomorrow it's a fresh day. You have to start afresh, and you've got to ignore both of them.
Right. And I think in terms of work and the managers that you have and the appraisals and the feedback that your manager gives is limited by the manager's ability and competency and his background and all of that.
Yes.
So we often think that, oh, the manager said this, so he must know everything, and then I'm bad or I'm good basis that.
Yeah.
So, true to that point, Arya, need to just take it with a pinch of salt. It's also good when somebody gives you, so all feedback is not to be taken as is.
Yes.
You have to think over it and discard some and choose the ones that you are also feeling is true, which means that you have also got to be open, otherwise you'll just discard everything.
Yeah.
And when you are not sure, talk to someone that you can trust and who has perspective about it. And for me, that's my brother. It used to be my father while he was here, and now it's my brother. So every time I get a feedback that I think makes me feel really down, then I talk it over just to know if a third party sees it the same way. So there are times when a third party has told me, hey, that doesn't resonate at all, or hey, you need to think about it. So both ways.
What's your superpower? This is on you, not on me.
Superpower. I'm a woman. What's your superpower?
I think ditto, copy paste.
So that talks to me. You should all go and read Maya Angelou's Phenomenal Woman, the poetry. It's my favorite to date. Talks about I am a phenomenal woman. Talks about you are a phenomenal woman. So the two quick points here is that in this day and age where there's so much of technology change and the way businesses work is changing, the leadership skills required is different. It's not the male leadership skills that are required. Woman leadership skills are super, super unique and they are important. So remember that you are unique and leverage your strengths. And also remember this when somebody critiques you, because they look at it from a man lens probably, and you have a unique female leadership skill in hand that's going to be really useful, just not discovered yet maybe.
Yes. Oh, this is this is the what I was talking about. Like when it
Yes.
comes to, so tying it all back, right? When it comes to personal brand, you have to be very conscious about what you put out there and what you don't. I used to be super active on Instagram at one point. I had about 1,500 followers. And then one morning I felt conscious about it. I started getting these messages that say, hey, you too cute, you so pretty, and all of that. And I started becoming so conscious. I sat down for 3 hours. I manually removed all my followers, brought it down to zero, and just kept posting on Instagram because I feel like documenting those memories, but I feel uncomfortable just owning the fact that people think I look good or that I'm cute or whatever they want to call me, right? And then I started thinking about it that, this is actually a weapon in my armory and I should use it. If I look good, I should leverage that to do something about it, to make good use of it, right? And that's how I started my Instagram back. I put it back on public, and now I do share my personal pictures as well, and try not to think too much about what others think of me, and just own the fact that, hey, you think I'm cute? Okay, thank you so much. That's a great compliment.
That is true. It's so hard for us to take compliments, right?
Yeah.
So be beautiful and be bold about it.
Oh, yes.
So
So
let's
comfortable.
get glass slippers. Let's tie the laces. Let's run, let's fly, let's soar. Right? Let's break the glass.
And thou shall be badass.
Yes. Love this.
Yeah. I think this sort of brings us to the end of this conversation. And this just sums it up, right? If we all had some magic wand and if we wanted to make some wish for all the women out there, I would just say this, and also be unstoppable. So there we go. I think it was so wonderful having you, Annie. And it's just so beautiful to rekindle this sisterhood and bring it all together. And,
True.
just be there for each other, share all these nuggets. So some things you learn and you share with me, some things I learn and I share with you. And it's so good that we have this open network where we're not envying each other, we're not competing with each other, but we're just trying to help each other and move forward together. It's not a zero-sum game. I read this somewhere. She has it does not mean that you can't have it. It means that you can have it too. Right.
Yes.
So,
True, true. So
yeah.
let's go and kick some ass.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking out time. It
Thank
was
you,
so
Arya.
wonderful having you.
I
This is
totally
Annie.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, me
And
too.
as always, let's do more of it.
Yes, it just felt like we were casually talking. And that's what I loved about it. It was not too formal. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
So this
Thank
is
you.
Annie. Reach out to her on LinkedIn or Twitter. She's active on both spaces. And this is me. I have a bunch of places where you can reach out to me. So figure out wherever you want to get in touch. We'll leave all these information in the descriptions and so on so that you can get in touch easily. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.